If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. It's been a long day. I do apologize. Dr. Lopkin, we really I want, and I know our listeners want your analysis on a lot there. We'll have to break it down into smaller bites, but the whole tariff situation. First, let's start off with stupid or masterclass. Let's just start off with that as we speak, after struggling more than plummeting for many days, 3 days, I believe, the stock market as we speak on a Wednesday at almost 3 o'clock, 2:35. The stock market is now at 40,000 and up almost 7%. But that aside, let's do your analysis of stupid or masterclass.
Okay, actually, it's somewhere in between. It's definitely not stupid, but it's not a masterclass by itself. And that's the mistake that most people seem to be making. They think everything is tied to the tariffs, but it's not. This is a massive strategy. It includes the tariffs. It includes unleashing American energy. It also includes keeping the Trump tax cuts in place to boost the middle class and underclasses. This is not a winner take all with the tariffs. The tariffs are basically there to get countries to come to the negotiating table. We've tried the carrot for years. It doesn't work. So Trump pulled out the stick.
I interject one thing about that. I agree with that 100%. It's multifaceted. However, when you look, you have to do it with the backdrop, the environment of what our situation is, starting with NAFTA starting with George H.W. Bush Sr. allowing or encouraging China to get into the G7. Maybe or maybe not a mistake. I think a mistake. But basically, we've been nuked over the last, now it's 30 years. It started, I got it. It happened it started a long time ago in the 70s, but hyper accelerated from the 90s on, the deindustrialization of America. And I think that's unsustainable. And also, I think that we were led by fools of both parties and at many levels. Your thoughts? A lot there, but your thoughts.
Yeah, it is our economy was unsustainable as it is. And that's part of what's key here. Trump is not putting tariffs in place just for trade. He is literally trying to remake our economic figures. He's trying to fix manufacturing. He's trying to bring more jobs back. And by the way, even before the tariffs, from during the Trump administration, just the mere 2 months that it's been, jobs were already coming up. The other
That is
thing,
correct.
the other thing is the Obama and Biden administrations crippled us with their environmental regulations. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe in environmental regulations. I believe we need to make sure our air stays clean. I believe we need to make sure our water stays clean. We need to make sure chemicals are not escaping into the environment. But cutting oil and coal and natural gas the way they did put us at such a disadvantage, it wasn't even funny. Now that Trump is putting the gas to our energy policies, allowing more drilling, he just signed an executive order allowing more coal. You're already seeing OPEC is increasing production, which forced prices down. The U.S. is increasing production already, which has forced prices down. We saw it over the last 2 weeks. Oil is dropping quite dramatically, and we're seeing it at the pump as well. Add the natural gas to that. What most people are failing to understand is that oil and natural gas are the baseline for our economy. Everything that is manufactured relies on oil and gas. Every farm relies on oil and gas. Natural gas is actually used to create the fertilizers that the farmers need. So everything we do is reliant on oil and natural gas, and those prices are coming down. The more they come down, the more they'll counteract any inflation from the tariffs. And on top of all of that, you're already seeing companies investing in America. You saw it before the tariffs. We now have 70 countries coming to the table to negotiate new trade deals. We would never have gotten them to come without the tariffs.
Okay, we've talked about, agreed, by the way, well done. We agree that Trump has many positives and many negatives. However, one thing, and I want to run this by you, I strongly believe 100% with his assertion, because it's backed up by evidence, that excluding few figures in the national scene, we have been led by idiots. You talk about the energy policy, okay? Totally abandoning or abandoning our position in the world arbitrarily, unilaterally, and basically assigning agreements where we have to compensate for other countries like China, India, where the real problem is. Not saying that we don't have opportunities to improve. That's not where the problem is. And also the stupid, just no strategic direction, wind farms and all this other crap. That's not, if you want cleaner energy, how about nuclear power that the libs destroyed 40 years ago? How about natural gas, almost 100% carbon free? I mean, just knee-jerk emotional reactions for strategic issues that boggles the mind.
It does. I think the big problem is, and you used just the perfect phrase, strategic issues. None of our leaders implemented any kind of sustainable strategy. Things have to be done in a certain way. And I'm not talking about following a government procedure or some random regulation that an attorney put in. I'm talking about if you want to shift over to renewable energy, and yes, nuclear is the most reliable, greenest energy we've got. The problem with nuclear is that
Abandoned by the Dems.
yes, the problem with nuclear is that most people got their information about nuclear energy from the movie The China Syndrome, which was
There you
fictional.
go. Which is actually true. Which is actually true. Being older than you, that had like that's and then the stars. They had what No Nukes concert. It became the in vogue thing. And didn't that tee things up for the last 40, 45 years?
That was
the Dems are emotionally driven with no thought process involved or little.
That was the start of it. But the basic strategic mistake that all of our administrations have made up to now, if you want to switch to renewable energy, if you want a more sustainable future, you don't start with the source of energy. You start by rebuilding the infrastructure of our electric grid, because that is holding us back. Not only is it keeping us tied to oil, gas, and more traditional forms of energy, but it's also inadequate to deliver the amount of electricity that America currently needs. And on top of that, I don't even want to get into how many security risks are there.
Yeah, just a little bit. Our infrastructure is like a la 1940, literally. It's pathetic. Um, do you find it troubling? I don't, because I think it's par for the course, that when we talk about the tariffs, getting back to that overarching issue, that you have leading Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, Chucky Schumer, only 20 years ago, basically promoting and chastising other administrations for not implementing tariffs against China. And now the tune has completely changed. I don't find it odd at all, actually.
No,
Par for the course.
it's politics as usual, unfortunately. If Trump says something is good, the Dems have to fight it. Doesn't matter that they've been pushing for tariffs for 20 years. It doesn't matter that, Trump has said we need to do this going back to the 1980s. There's actually an interview he did with Oprah Winfrey where he talks about doing exactly this. If Trump says it, it must be bad. That's the Democrats' knee-jerk reaction, because they've got no power, and worse, they've got no issue to stand on. They're still falling back to Orange Man bad.
And Nazis. You got to throw I love the
Yes.
Hitler thing. I mean, that has been so played out. I don't think it even resonates anymore. But do you find this interesting in spite of all the negative press, because the mainstream media corporate media has not learned any lessons, neither has the Democrats, by the way. But even on CNN, they were looking at the polls and how it relates to Trump, in spite of this controversy and uncertainty. Basically, if you look at, does Trump have too much power? Too much power. It's like something, I'm not going to do all the figures, but just right is like 35. Not enough is like 19. So it adds up that it's like 55%, either enough or not enough. So my question is two questions, really. Does crying wolf and just yelling Nazi and hysteria on the Dems and the libs and the liberal media chiming in, has it lost residency? I say yes.
Oh, absolutely. When you repeat something over and over again, and it turns out not to be true, and there's evidence that it isn't true, then yeah, people go, oh, you're yelling that again? Well, you go do that. I'll be over here. Whenever you're done, come back. But the reactions of the Democrats has been hysterical. My favorite reaction was Kamala Harris giving a speech saying, we knew this was going to happen. I told you this was going to happen. I told you he would ruin the economy. It's like, now, first of all, knowing it was going to happen, he campaigned on doing this. Everybody knew he was going to do this. As for destroying the economy, they've seemed to have lost all sense of time. The market dropped for 3 days. Yes, they were large drops, but 3 days. By the same token, they've been yelling, well, he hasn't fixed inflation yet. He's been in office for under 3 months. And yet, these same people said, oh, no, there's no problem when inflation skyrocketed because of their policies.
Yes, and that's why they've lost all credibility. But maybe I'm naive. But it does bother me that, and we've talked about this before, even in terrestrial radio, that all parties do it. I get it, but I think the Democrats, especially lately, are just drunk on it, and that is their addiction to power versus putting America first. I know all politicians are politicians by nature and opportunists, but I've never seen anything like this in my whole life. And I think that goes to the whole credibility issue of the Democrats overall. That people just go, okay, and like you've said, you cry wolf, long enough, you become hysterical, you pull a Cory Booker, you start becoming comical. I mean, filibustering over nothing. I don't even understand. Obviously, positioning himself for the next election, duh. But I think they really have a problem. And what do you think of this concept? I've heard this on. I don't know exactly what the show is. And then, Victor Hansen, I love the guy. Basically saying that if Trump pulls this off, and it's not a guarantee, then it's pretty much game over. Dems, check please. Your thoughts? I do
Well,
believe that, by the way.
that's
If
definitely
this,
that's definitely a possibility. But the whole reason that the Dems have gone so far out of their mind, as you said, just desperate for power rather than what's good for America, is because at least in my lifetime, no party has ever had this much power stripped from them.
true, yes,
They lost again. They lost both houses, although not by much. The majorities are pretty slim.
they
They
got their
lost.
ass kicked.
Yeah, they lost the White House. Now, I mean, and for the first time in I think 40 years, the Supreme Court doesn't swing liberal anymore. So they lost that. Now a study just came out, and I can't remember the organization, but they study population shifts. And looking at the census data, they are predicting that in after the 2030 census, which is only 5 years away, blue states are going to lose. They have the possibility of losing 10 congressional seats.
Hmm. And that goes along with it, electoral votes too.
Right. So this is literally the low point that I have ever seen any party. They have nothing, so they're grasping at straws, trying to find anything they can. And the Supreme Court just cut them off at the knees because they said, no, you can't do venue shopping anymore.
Yes, I agree with the analysis, and it can't be overstated that when you're the opposition party, oftentimes that's an opportunity. Sometimes being in leadership has its detrimental repercussions and aspects to it. But if you are the minority party, you have to have a cohesive message. I mean, it's all over the place. You got Bernie and AOC, these two nutcases doing rallies, so on and so forth. But I think it's very interesting. And what I find very positive, by the way, is Trump switching the game today and saying, okay, no or reducing tariffs on other countries. And this is again, Victor Hansen said this. I heard him last night saying it on a broadcast that basically he has an opportunity to really put China in their economic and political box. I think, by doing that and looking at other opportunities around the world, I think he's the first president in the last 40 years that hasn't enabled, and we can also throw in corporate America, that has not contributed to China's or exasperated China's rise and enabled them.
Well, corporate America has been complicit in China's rise, but let's be realistic. Corporate America has one job: to produce goods and services at a price that the American people will purchase. Well, the Democrats kept trying to raise the corporate tax rate, which meant companies had to find somewhere else to save money. Then the Democrats kept empowering the unions, and raising minimum wages, which caused labor costs to go up. So they had to, again, find somewhere else to save money. So, yes, corporate America was complicit, but they were basically pushed into it by the Democrats' liberal policies.
I would not argue with that. The only thing I would have to say as a caveat is that being in corporate at that time, it became a knee jerk reaction. China, 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 in spite of some evidence that might have suggested it might not have been as positive as outlined. Yes, you are 100%,
Right.
and I can throw in also environmental and other
Oh,
regulations
yes.
that were 100% business unfriendly. And I just want to jump back that I I somewhat am going to push back that I believe if Trump pulls this off, given the state of the Democratic Party, when I say game over, I don't mean forever, but for the
Right.
next possibly 5 years, I do believe it will be check, please.
Well,
And
yes,
more importantly, I'm talking midterms and 2020 whatever's eight there. Yes.
if Trump pulls this off, the Democrats are going to be in the weeds for a long time, no doubt. My caveat is the Democrats may be in the weeds for a long time, even if he doesn't pull it off. If he manages to, if all of this doesn't work and we end up returning to the status quo with no real benefit but no real damage, the Democrats still can be in the weeds for quite a long time because they don't have a coherent message. Their approval rating is at the lowest point, I think, in Democratic history. I'm not 100% sure of that.
Maybe possibly in political history overall. The only caveat I would say to that exception would be possibly post Watergate. That's pretty low.
Yeah.
It's not good.
And they're reaching to the wrong places. I mean, you mentioned Bernie and AOC are going on tour. They've actually been joined on tour for these rallies by Joan Baez and Neil Young. So 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 the
oh yeah, talk about relevancy.
right. So the Irrelevant Has Been tour is going to be coming to a town near you. You know.
And wait a second, though. There is something very interesting about the irrelevancy tour. I like that. Wow. Yeah, when you have no ability to sell albums, what else? Join AOC and Bernie. But it is interesting. The only strong or relatively strong constituency that the Dems have at this particular point in time is the Woodstock generation. Yeah, dude. Haight Ashbury. Interesting, but it's true. Young people are abandoning the Democratic Party.
Young
The Neil Youngs of the world.
Yeah, young people are abandoning them. Gen X abandoned them in droves in this last election. In fact, demographically, Gen X is considered the reason the Democrats lost so big. And part of that is you're seeing a generational shift in the Republican Party from the old stodgy guys that everybody has been portraying to younger Gen X and to a lesser extent Gen Y, where the Democrats leapfrogged over Gen X and Gen Y and went from the old stodgy people right to the millennials and right to the leftist wackos instead of the mainstream.
Yes, I think it's also, there's a very good point. And from a marketing perspective, I find it fascinating. How do you like that? That you went from, let's just say back in the day, it was the Libs. They were cool, Saturday Night Live. Yeah, man, the staunchy country club Republicans. It's completely flipped. It's the old boring. Yeah, great, Neil Young. Come out with another album. I can't wait for it, please. That and watching paint dry. So it's the whole thing. To your point, it's flipped on its head. It's completely reversed. And if you're young, so for instance, putting in perspective, in the 1970s, if you're young, yeah, ooh, I don't want to be a Democrat. I mean, a Republican. They're like, old and staunchy. It's like exactly like you said. It's completely turned on its head. And for the further final analysis on this, Dr. Lopkin, repercussions of that happening. Might be an obvious question, but I don't know. I'm not so sure. I
Yeah,
mean, because you have older people liking the Democrats or the only constituency left, it's maybe more dire than the statistics point out because those people, the Woodstock boomers, I'm sorry, I hate to be dire, but aren't going to be around forever.
well,
The
no,
base is gone.
the base is deteriorating, and I think honestly the only reason that the the hippie generation is still hanging on to the Democrats is one, habit.
Yes,
they were Democrats from the beginning, fight the man, except now the Democrats are the man.
without
And
question.
and quite frankly, the the hippie generation is not keeping up. They don't. If you take a look at at media consumption, these are the folks that are still watching the
Have cable.
6:30. Yeah, they still have cable. They're still watching the 6:30 evening newscast. Some of them are still getting print newspapers, and those that
No doubt.
aren't
Great
are
analysis.
are still looking at newspapers online. They're not listening to podcasts. They're not listening to news from other sources. So they are essentially being brainwashed by the liberal media.
Very interesting point. And really, when I think about it, I was listening to the analysis. I think it's also very interesting. I think the liberal media or corporate media is basically feeding off that energy that's misplaced. In other words, they're still the proverbial echo chamber. But in this case, you have the people at the end of the line, so to speak, and you had instead of redirecting their message, is my point. I'm talking corporate media. They're still it's a perpetual love fest, but in terms of viability, it goes nowhere. Isn't that ironic?
It is, and
Like the New York
now
Post, or Times. Go ahead. Sorry.
if you actually watch legacy media now, in particular the network newscasts, CNN, MSNBC, they're basically playing cover your ass because now they're starting to ask politicians, well, when did you know that Biden was incompetent? And they're starting to push on this, except they're completely ignoring the fact that they knew. Was it Chuck Todd said he knew in 2021, and they were absolutely complicit in the cover up.
Yes, I think talk about losing credibility, and that brings us to our next topic, and that I believe, and I truly believe this. This is not just being biased or Pollyannic. I believe that the Joe Biden cover-up makes Watergate look like nothing. And Watergate had no real geopolitical repercussions. Okay, it was Nixon being paranoid and blah blah blah. We all know the drill, right? This had monumental implications. I mean, this is so huge. Again, legacy media ain't doing shit about it, but it is so huge. You had someone, and again, I thought he was blown out, but I think I underestimated it. I mean, when these books and revelations are still starting to pour in, this guy was not, he wasn't even asleep at the switch. He was dead on the switch. Your thoughts?
Yeah,
a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, the revelations that are coming out now, and it's hysterical because the people who are writing these books and making these revelations are the same people that was covering this up from the American public. But now we're actually getting details. The one that frightened me the most was the fact that the White House staff had to put down fluorescent tape on the
God, that's
floor
scary.
so that Biden would know where to walk. If
Yes,
you're,
and how about the makeup artist because he looked like the crib keeper? It's actually,
yes,
I
they
think
had.
there'd be a great opportunity for a comedy movie. Be fantastic. It's unbelievable.
I mean, realistically, it's not all that different from the HBO show Veep, but
Yeah, pretty. Yes, yes, yes.
but yeah, the makeup, the fact that he couldn't address small groups without a teleprompter. Who was
I
running
think it has
the
huge
country?
repercussions for legacy media, and I think the Democratic Congress and maybe the Department of Justice has to launch real aggressive probes. This has to be addressed. This is not a bunch of BS. This has monumental implications, and I in particular want to know, and I think a lot of Americans do, who the hell is running the country? This guy was not running the country, and also brings up another issue with the auto signature. I mean, if this guy, if you could actually draw conclusions that he was not all there, basically Law 101, it's called a contract with an infant. It's not talking about age, but it actually, if someone's demented, drunk, high, whatever, the contract's null and void. This has repercussions. I don't think it's just a false flag. What do you think?
No, there are very real repercussions, and also if he didn't sign bills into law, if he was unaware of the bills that were coming across his desk, well, government 101, if if the bill sits on his desk unsigned for, and I don't remember the amount of time, that's an automatic veto, which means the Congress enacted laws illegally. So the infrastructure law, the Green New Deal, the quote unquote Inflation Reduction Act,
Yep.
all of these could be null and void because of Biden's state of mind. And on top of that, I mean, those are theoretical, we don't know,
Of
but
course.
we do know that Vladimir Putin would not have invaded Ukraine had he thought there was a strong America backing Ukraine up.
Yes. And again, all the Ukraine liberal supporters, which, supporting Ukraine, I got that. But yeah, why don't you address the issue? There would have been no conflict, you moron. So it has huge repercussions and ramifications. That's why I think Watergate pales in comparison to
Right. I
this.
mean,
And
remember, Biden literally told Putin a limited incursion is fine.
yes, a limited, a small pregnancy is okay. That's fine. Yeah,
Right.
it's totally unbelievable, and I think there's a lot going to be happening on that. Um, Something that is always interesting is the state of the Democratic leadership. Who's that person from Texas and others? She basically had a thing. We need more immigrants because blacks aren't going to crock it. Aren't going to pick cotton. But I also think it's really funny, ending on a more comical note, Dr. Lopkin. Couple things. Number one is, what is it about all these accents? This Crocker woman and others, AOC, that we'll talk about in a second. They get the ghetto thing, but then you see them in other interviews. Not that they're brilliant, by the way, but they talk like a normal person. And then they're in a, they get the whole rap thing going on. I mean, these people are clowns. They're jokes. They're jokes. They can't be taken seriously.
Yeah, I mean, how offensive is it to put on a fake accent to kowtow to an audience? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You don't do that. And yet the left seems fine with it. If a Republican ever tried that, they'd have lynched him.
They would have said that's the height of racism. Okay, you couldn't even imagine. But is it really all that surprising? Because isn't most of what they do patronizing different groups? I mean, if they didn't have that, they'd have nothing. With the people, the boomers that are still hanging on and believe that crap, or that have done so many drugs they can't think for themselves. But without divide and conquer, they got nothing. And patronization.
No,
What do they have? You tell me what they got. Nothing.
They have played identity politics for so long that seems to be all they have left.
Yes, but they do have a great message, like AOC and Bernie. I love that. We talked about Bernie, the self-hating Jew, the one that's basically still talking about withholding aid to Israel. Great guy. But yeah, I love that. Like he didn't work till he was like 40, never had a job. Basically, believe it or not, he stole the electricity from other apartments. A real class act, right? And now he's got 3 houses. He's probably worth 10 million because he always ramped up. Remember, millionaires now is billionaires. But then you have AOC again. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, I'm a bartender. And that's really interesting because that whole shtick is a bunch of bullshit. You know that? She went to one of the most expensive schools you can ever do, Boston University. She grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood. The only reason she was a bartender is she was too stupid to get a real job. And yet, she's talking about socialism and the oligarchs and all that kind of stuff, and yet she's flying first class. Oh, gee, maybe a little. You didn't think that went through, AOC, did you?
No, I mean, I don't think she thinks anything through.
No.
I mean, Senator John Kennedy had a statement about AOC, and it was absolute gold. He said, "I consider AOC to be the leader of the Democratic Party. I think she's the reason there are directions on a shampoo bottle. And our plan for dealing with her is Operation Let Her Speak."
Well, sometimes he is eloquent in his own ways, because I think give her all the oxygen in the room that she needs. I think that would be tremendous. Well, we usually have a broad brush of topics, but I think it was a very good idea for our listeners to be focused on the real big issues. There's a lot, obviously with this tariffs and the Biden controversy. Those are gargantuan in my estimation. Any final thoughts, Dr. Lopkin?
Well, I find it interesting that the same people who tried to frame Donald Trump in the Russia collusion and who impeached him with no high crimes or misdemeanors are the same folks that covered up the Biden controversy, kept it from the American people, and now are fighting Trump's common sense agenda, despite the fact that they spent 20 years fighting for it.
Well, 100%. Only the doctor can do that. That's it in a nutshell, isn't it? And that's why their approval rate. There is no approval rating. I think Neil Young, and who else we could be in that boat? Maybe Bob Dylan. Yeah, they're strong supporters. And Legacy Media. How do you say I love the Irrelevancy tour. That's excellent. Yes. Like it a lot. Well, Dr. Lopkin, great show.
The Irrelevant Has Been tour. Yes, it's.
I love that. Love that. Well, Dr. Lopkin, another great show. I will say, usually we say I'll see you next week, but I was remiss, Dr. Lopkin. I will be on vacation next week. We have to take a 1-week leave of absence. That is okay with you, Dr. Lopkin?
That is okay. You deserve the vacation. And Lord knows at the speed that things are going on, when we come back, we'll have so much to talk about.
And to that point, our listeners can contribute to the conversation, can't they?
Yes, we want to hear what you think. What do you think of Trump's policies? What do you think of the Democratic Party? We want to hear from you. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Message us. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect. Send us a message there. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at the Carnivore Radio website, xvadio.com, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopkin. I'll see you in 2.
We'll see you then.